They thought they were just arresting another guy who matched the description, but when he showed up in court the next day, not in handcuffs but in a suit, they realized they'd made the worst mistake of their careers. It was just after 9 a.m. when the call came over the radio. Black male, mid-30s, navy jacket, suspected in a car break-in on Madison Avenue. Officers Brent Halcroft and Lynn Mercer were already cruising down the block, sipping coffee, barely paying attention. They exchanged a glance like it was a joke. "There he is," Brent muttered, nodding toward a man standing outside Grange Bakehouse, one of downtown Boise's busiest cafes. The man looked calm, focused, scrolling through his phone, a croissant bag in one hand. He sort of matched the description, close enough for them. Brent parked fast, no lights, no sirens. Lynn was out of the car before it fully stopped. "Hey, hands where I can see them," she barked. The man, Kenton Miro, looked up, surprised but not panicked. "Excuse me? You fit a suspect's description. Don't move," Brent added, stepping closer, his hand near his gun. "I'm standing outside a bakery," Kenton said, confused. "Waiting for my driver." Lynn rolled her eyes. "We'll sort it out at the station." Kenton barely had time to respond before Brent grabbed his arm and twisted him around. "You resisting now?" he said loudly. For the crowd, people stopped. Phones came out. Kenton didn't fight back. He said nothing else, just stared at the sidewalk as they cuffed him. Lynn smirked. "Funny how they act tough till the cuffs come out. Probably another fake LinkedIn hotshot with a fancy story." Brent laughed. "Yeah, like we haven't heard that before." They didn't read him his rights, didn't ask for ID, didn't check his phone or the shopping bag with a receipt still inside. They just shoved him into the patrol car and drove off, already joking about the paperwork. In the back seat, Kenton sat perfectly still, silent. "Got anything to say?" Brent taunted over his shoulder. Kenton's voice was ice calm. "I want my phone call." Brent scoffed. "You'll get it after booking." But something in Kenton's tone, steady, patient, almost bored, made Brent glance back. Through the rearview mirror, Kenton didn't look scared, didn't look rattled, and he didn't look finished. At the precinct, things started unraveling fast. Booking was slow. The desk officer, Rob Tesh, blinked twice when he saw Kenton. Guys, you sure about this one?" Brent waved him off. "Fits the call. Car break-in." He was loitering. "I was standing outside a bakery," Kenton said quietly. "With a pastry bag and a phone." Lynn cut in. "You doubting a field call, Tesh?" Rob hesitated, then took Kenton's info. His eyes flicked to the screen, then widened. "This address." "I'd like my call now," Kenton repeated, polite but firm. Brent smirked. "Who you going to call, lawyer buddy?" "No," Kenton said. "The Attorney General's office." Brent burst out laughing. "Sure, tell him we said hi." They walked off, but Rob Tesh didn't laugh. He kept staring at the screen. And that's when everything tilted, though Brent and Lynn had no idea just how deep they'd already sunk. The holding cell was cold. Not freezing, but the kind of chill that seeps into your bones when you're stuck in cuffs. Kenton sat on the bench, not slouching, not tense, just still. Even in jeans and a jacket, he looked sharp. Polished boots, clean lines, everything about him screamed control. Down the hall, Brent leaned against a vending machine, cracking open a soda like it was any other day. "You see his face? Acting like he's above this." Lynn sipped her coffee. "They always do. Hang around nice areas, think the rules don't apply." Brent grinned. "My favorite part's when they threaten lawsuits, like we haven't heard that 1,000 times." Neither noticed the internal affairs officer walking past the front desk, or that Rob Tesh had slipped into a back office, speaking in a hushed voice on a secure line. Kenton finally got his call. He didn't scramble for a number, didn't hesitate, just dialed. "Morrow here," he said, when the line picked up. "Boise PD Madison Avenue incident. Need everything by this afternoon." Then he hung up. No rage, no dramatics, just done. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. That was all it took. By that afternoon, the precinct chief got an email. Not from a lawyer, from the state's Civil Oversight Department. Subject: immediate release of detainee Kenton L. Morrow. Attached were credentials, federal database links, and a notice of an audit under Article 14 of the State Law Enforcement Integrity Act. Within 45 minutes, Kenton was free. When Brent saw him again, it wasn't in cuffs or a cell, but walking down the hallway flanked by two stone-faced suits from the state. Brent's stomach dropped. "That's not possible." Lynn scowled. "What the hell's going on?" Rob Tesh watched from his desk, silent, typing something into a system they couldn't access. Kenton didn't look back, didn't smirk, just walked out with the same calm stride he'd had all along. The silence he left behind was heavier than any siren. That night, Brent ranted to his brother over dinner. Connections, favoritism, whole damn system's rigged. Lynn, on her porch with a beer, told her girlfriend, "Probably a mix-up. Guy's still got a record coming. Nobody's that clean." But as days passed, whispers spread. Someone mentioned Kenton's name in briefing, and two sergeants exchanged a look. An officer muttered, "He used to work in Oakland, high up in some watchdog group." Even Captain Rolstad got twitchy, dodging questions, choosing his words too carefully. That got Brent nervous. If command was sweating, this wasn't just paperwork. Lynn shrugged it off. "We've got body cam, call logs, we followed protocol." But for the first time, Brent wondered, what if they hadn't? Brent nodded, but it was forced. His stomach twisted because something about Kenton didn't make sense, not in the way they'd expected, and the way Kenton had left without a fight. That wasn't how guilty people acted. Still, they went back to work like nothing had changed. But the truth was already moving faster than they were. By the time they even felt the ground shaking beneath them, Kenton was already standing on higher ground, watching everything. The courthouse in downtown Boise wasn't fancy. Just concrete steps, glass doors, and the sound of shoes echoing down wide hallways. Brent and Lynn walked in side by side, both in crisp uniforms, badges polished, no smiles. This was routine. They'd done court appearances more times than they could count. The charge was simple: obstructing a stolen vehicle investigation. They expected Kenton to show up late, maybe with some slick lawyer trying to turn it into a show, but Kenton wasn't outside, wasn't in the waiting area, wasn't even on the docket, like a normal suspect. As they passed security, a bailiff approached them, face stiff. "You two testifying in courtroom 2C? Brent nodded. "Yeah, Halcroft and Mercer, this the Miro case?" The bailiff blinked. "Morrow's not the defendant." Brent frowned. "What?" The bailiff just pointed. "You'll see." When they stepped into 2C, everything felt wrong. Not chaotic, not loud, just different. The room was packed, not with the usual nervous suspects and bored lawyers, but with the journalists. 2 camera crews, someone from city council. Brent's neck tensed, then his eyes locked on the front table. There, seated beside the Judge Wobbers, was Kenton Morrow. No cuffs, no defense attorney, just a man in a sharp black suit calmly flipping through a binder. A nameplate in front of him read, "Special Counsel for Civil Accountability, State of Idaho." Lynn leaned in. "What is this?" Brent's voice was low. "I don't know. This wasn't in the case file." The judge called the room to order. "Today's session concerns a procedural review regarding conduct during a recent arrest on Madison Avenue," she said. "Mr. Morrow will serve in an advisory capacity representing the state's Civil Accountability Office." Lynn's jaw twitched. Brent looked like he'd been slapped. Kenton didn't glance their way, not once. He just sat back as the judge turned to the front bench. "Officers Halcroft and Mercer, please approach." They moved stiffly, no longer in control. Every eye in the room was on them, but not the way they were used to. This wasn't respect. It was scrutiny. The judge spoke first. "Can you walk us through your reasoning for detaining Mr. Morrow?" Brent cleared his throat. "We got a call. Blackmail, navy jacket. Mr. Morrow has no prior record," the judge cut in. "Was his ID checked before detainment?" Lynn jumped in. "He matched the description and he didn't comply with commands." Kenton didn't look up, but he did click his pen, once, slow, deliberate. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Morrow, any clarifying points?" For the first time, Kenton looked directly at them. "In my line of work," he said, voice steady. "I've read hundreds of reports that start the same way, vague descriptions, unchecked assumptions. Over time, those patterns tell a story." Lynn opened her mouth to interrupt, but Kenton raised a finger, not at her, at the judge. "I move to suspend direct testimony. An internal review has been authorized. A hearing will follow in 2 weeks." The room went dead silent. The judge nodded. "Granted." Brent and Lynn didn't say a word. They stepped back, numb. Kenton closed his binder, stood and walked out. No smirk, no gloating. But his presence was heavier than any argument they could have made. And when he left, the word press followed. Brent's hands shook. Lynn whispered, "What the hell is happening?" But deep down they both knew. This wasn't a loss in court. This was the opening move. And Kenton had just flipped the board. Before Boise, before the suit and the title, Kenton Morrow was just another kid trying to stay out of trouble in Bakersfield, California. His mother, Deirdre Morrow, worked night shifts at Mercy Hospital. His father, when he was around, painted houses, rarely staying long enough to leave anything behind but cigarette smoke and silence. By 12, Kenton had already learned to navigate 2 worlds, one at his school, where he aced spelling bees and science fairs, and one outside, where he kept his eyes down when patrol cars rolled by. Kenton wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but he watched everything. One day in 8th grade, a teacher accused him of stealing a calculator. No one else was questioned. His locker was tossed, nothing was found. He didn't argue then, but he never forgot. How easily adults believed the worst when it was pointed at him. It wasn't rage that drove him after that. It was the pattern. At 17, he landed a scholarship to UC Davis, majored in political science, wrote essays that sliced through the noise, no yelling, just facts. Clean, sharp. In a room full of hot takes, his silence felt like a verdict. Law school at Stanford came next. No connections, no favors, just grit. While classmates chased corporate paychecks, Kenton interned with Alameda County's Public Accountability Unit, sat through hearings where officers described routine stops that left people with broken ribs, bruised wrists. He took notes, didn't wear anger like armor, wore patience like a weapon. By 33. He was leading reviews for the Western District's Office of Civil Conduct. Case by case, he built a reputation, not the flashy kind that made headlines, but the kind that made departments nervous. He moved like a lawyer, thought like an analyst, carried himself like a man who already knew what you were hiding. Boise was his first appointment as special counsel for civil accountability, a position created after watchdog groups got sick of internal affairs investigating itself. The state board vetted him quietly. No fanfare. Kenton kept a low profile on purpose. No tweets, no lectures. He just showed up. Is that morning outside the bakery? Not the first time he'd been profiled, but the first time it happened after his appointment. That was what mattered, because now he didn't need to file a complaint. He was the complaint. Revenge would have been too small. He wanted truth on paper. Wanted patterns exposed. wanted departments to know they were being watched, not just from the inside. After the arrest, he didn't call the news, he called a judge. Then the Office of Personnel Audits. His badge wasn't brass, it was legislative. Gave him authority to unseal files, pull records, reopen cases buried for years. Well, that's why Brent and Lynn were sweating. This wasn't about one arrest. It was about all of them. Kenton wasn't some lawyer they'd bumped into by accident. He was the one person in the state with the clearance and the motive to dissect their entire careers, and he didn't need to raise his voice to do it. The precinct felt different. Not louder, not busier, just tense. Brent noticed it first, walked into the break room, and conversations stopped. Not the silence of interrupted jokes, the kind where people don't want to be heard. He grabbed his lunch, pretended not to care. But something was off. Lynn caught on hours later, past a conference room, saw Lieutenant Schaffer huddled with two suits. No department badges. One carried a leather folio, the kind hub feds used to always have. She slowed, tried to catch a name. They shut up the second she walked by. That night, Brent's cop cousin in Twin Falls called. "Hey, you didn't cuff some guy named Morrow last week, did you?" Brent's stomach dropped. Why? His name's everywhere. State audit boards circling. Whole precincts redoing paperwork like they're next. Brent forced a laugh. Nah, just a misunderstanding. We cleared it. Even Hixie didn't believe it anymore. 2 days later, the captain called them in, not a casual chat. Formal request, full uniforms, paper trail. They stepped into his office. The two suits from the hallway sat across from the captain's desk. "Officers Halcroft Mercer," Captain Rolstad began, voice clipped. "This is Mr. Granger and Ms. Osai from the Office of Civil Accountability." Ms. Osai didn't smile, didn't blink much either. "We're opening an internal review regarding last Thursday's incident involving Mr. Kenton Morrow." Brent's face went blank. "We already handled that. He was released. Case closed." Granger cut in. "The investigation goes beyond the arrest." Lynn stiffened in her chair. "Excuse me. We're reviewing your history. Complaints, stops, reports filed, and those that were adjusted after the fact." Captain Rolstad shifted, then slid a manila folder across the desk. "You'll receive subpoenas for the review hearing in 2 weeks." Brent opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Lynn swallowed hard. "Are we being accused of something?" "Not yet," Granger said. "That's what the hearing is for." The next morning, an email landed in both their inboxes. Subject: Case Review. Summary prepared by Special Counsel K. Morrow. Attachments. Lots of them. Old stops, body cam timestamps, civilian statements, things they thought no one would piece together. Brent's hands hovered over his keyboard for a full minute before he could click. The first file, a stop from 3 years ago. Julian York. Pulled over for a broken taillight. Detained for Baham non-compliance. Charges dropped. Bodycam footage not uploaded. York's statement said he'd been slammed against his car after asking for a supervisor. Brent remembered. Not clearly, but enough. He closed the file, chest tight. Lynn messaged him. "They're going to make this look like a pattern." Brent typed back, "It is a pattern." A long pause, then Lynn replied, "We followed protocol." But even she didn't sound sure anymore, because Kenton wasn't just bringing one story, he was bringing receipts. And Brent and Lynn were finally realizing this wasn't a cleanup, it was an autopsy. The hearing wasn't at the precinct or courthouse. It was in a bland municipal building off Fairview Avenue, the kind used for zoning meetings and forgotten city business. But today, every chair in that grey-walled room felt electric. Brent adjusted his tie by 3 times. Before walking in, Lynn sat in the hallway, flipping through a folder she hadn't actually read in 20 minutes. They weren't alone. Dozens filled the room. Legal observers, a city ethics board member, 2 from the state AG's office. No uniforms, no allies. At the head of the table, Kenton Morrow. He didn't look angry. That would have been easier. He looked prepared. Beside him, Ms. Osai opened the hearing in a flat voice. This is a formal review under Article 14. Officers Halcroft and Mercer are present. Allegations concern abuse of discretionary authority and repeated misapplication of procedural stops. She turned to Kenton. Special Counsel Morrow, you have the floor. Kenton didn't raise his voice. Didn't lean in. He just opened his folder. This won't be about accusations, he said. It'll be about patterns. He placed a document on the table. Case 1, Julian York, stopped for a broken taillight. Detained 45 minutes, no charges, no body cam footage. Lynn cleared her throat. That was 3 years ago. Kenton didn't look up. Case 2, Alan Rivers. Matched a robbery suspect's description, same precinct, same phrasing, detained without probable cause, no charges. Another sheet slid forward. Case 3, same officers, same language, fit the description, suspicious behavior, non-compliant tone. Brent leaned in. We respond to calls as they come in. We don't control the descriptions. Kenton finally looked at him. But you control how long you hold someone. You control whether you check IDs, whether you ask questions before making assumptions. You control your tone, your language, and how many people with no record walk away with bruises and no apology. Kenton pulled out a printed map marked with red pins. These are all your stops over the last 5 years. The pins weren't scattered. They key clustered on specific streets in certain neighborhoods. We compared your data to 3 other patrol teams. Kenton continued. You average 42% more stops. 80% involve one demographic. 90% result in no charges. Ms. Osai added quietly. That's not policing, that's profiling. Lynn's voice tightened. So we're on trial for doing our jobs? For following protocol? You're not on trial, Kenton said, still calm. You're in review, a review triggered because, for once, you stopped the bold wrong person. Not someone with less credibility, not someone without recourse. Me. He let the silence hang. I wasn't special that day, no badge, just a man outside a bakery. You decided that was enough. Brent exhaled hard. We had a dispatch. We didn't target you. You didn't have to, Kenton said. You've built a system where the targeting happens automatically. His gaze swept the room, then locked back on them. You can't fix what you won't admit. No one spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't victorious. It was surgical. This wasn't revenge, it was exposure. Every skipped step, every rushed report, every rolled eye at a civilian complaint, all of it surfaced now. Because when you make the same call over and over, it stops being a mistake. It becomes who you are. By the second day, Brent was cracking. He walked in older, eyes dull, jaw clenched, barely spoke to Lynn. She wore her usual defiance, but her eyes betrayed her. Scanning the room too fast, watching too close, Kenton didn't bring fire and brimstone. He brought testimony. One by one they came. Julian York, the taillight stop. Told how asking for a supervisor got him a sprained wrist, how his complaint vanished into silence. Alan Rivers, mistaken for a robber, described being thrown down in front of his daughter, who didn't speak for days after. Brent shifted during that one. Others followed. Not all showed up, but the ones who didn't shout. They just told the truth. That made it worse. No holes to poke, just lives upended. Lynn crossed her arms. We've seen the worst of people. We can't afford to hesitate when things match up. Kenton studied her like a building before demolition. Maybe the problem is what you consider a dead match. Brent's voice frayed. You don't know what it's like out there. People lie, threaten, run. It changes you. Kenton nodded. The job is hard, but when the same faces keep paying for others' mistakes, that's not danger, that's comfort. Comfort? Lynn scoffed. Yes, the comfort of the predictable assumptions. The comfort of never being the one on the ground. Brent's shoulders sank just slightly. Ems. Osai opened another folder. 3 reports show altered body cam footage. 1 corrupted, 1 never uploaded. Brent's reply was sluggish. Tech issues, not on us. Kenton didn't blink. Maybe not the first time, or the second, but now we're at 2-4. But for once, Lynn had no comeback. The weight of reports, footage, patterns. It pressed against them now, no shield left. Kenton wasn't swinging a hammer, he was just holding up a light. A panel member, a former officer, leaned in. Do you acknowledge your methods may have caused harm? Lynn stared at the table. Finally muttered, We did what we were taught. The words hung there, sour and heavy. Kenton spoke softly. Then maybe it's time we teach something else. Because once you see the cracks, he let the sentence dangle. You can't pretend the wall still stands. The final day began without fireworks. No gavel, no yelling, just the rustle of papers. And the quiet dread of people who knew some wouldn't walk out the same. Brent and Lynn sat side by side, still in uniform, but something between them had ruptured. Brent had stopped defending. He sat quiet, hollow. Lynn kept her arms folded, lips pressed tight, no longer smug, just rigid. Kenton Morrow stood alone at the center of the room. No legal team, no drama, just a man with a worn folder. He placed it gently on the table. I've said what needed saying. You've heard from those affected, seen the numbers, the reports, the recovered footage. A glance at Brent. I don't believe either of you joined this job to hurt people, but somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing individuals, started seeing profiles. The room held its breath. I'm not here to ruin lives, that's not justice. I'm here because the system can't fix itself if it keeps protecting patterns that don't work. He turned to the board. My recommendation, Officers Halcroft and Mercer removed from field duty indefinitely, mandatory retraining, psychological review, and every flagged case. Reopened. Brent didn't flinch. He'd known. Lynn whispered, it was just a job. Kenton locked eyes with her. Number. It was a bad responsibility. Forget that, and people get hurt. And the board deliberated for 35 minutes. The verdict? Brent Halcroft. Suspended, badge stripped, reassessment pending. Lynn Mercer. Same, no outbursts, no slammed chairs, just 2 officers realizing, too late, that their badges weren't shields. Kenton gathered his things. As he passed Brent, the broken man looked up. I didn't think it'd end like this. It didn't have to, Kenton said. But that wasn't my call. He walked away. That night, Brent packed his locker alone. Lynn never showed. Rumor said she'd fled to Wyoming. The precinct? Already shifting, a new poster in the hallway. Civil Accountability Hotline, confidential. Rookies eyed it longer than necessary. Kenton flew to Coeur d'Alene the next morning. Another city, another precinct, another quiet review. That was the work, not headlines. Structure, truth. He didn't need applause, just cracks in the wall, no longer hidden. Because when no one watches the watchers, the cycle that never breaks. 2 months later, Boise adjusted. No protests, no viral moments, but a shift beneath the surface. Kenton didn't stay. His job was motion, city to city, case to case, not to be the story, just to ensure consequences existed for everyone. The changes, training manuals rewritten. Recruits now asked, have you ever learned from a mistake? Brent. Worked impound lots, quiet and unarmed. Some said bitter, others said listening. Lynn vanished. No apologies, no acceptance, just gone. A few victims? Julian York, Alan Rivers, got quiet apologies, no fanfare, just acknowledgement. The lesson wasn't that Brent and Lynn were monsters. It was how easy it is to stop seeing people as people, and how deadly that becomes in uniform. Maybe now, some rookie with a fresh badge would unpause next time, ask a question, check an ID. Maybe that's how change starts, not with fireworks, but with one life altered. Kenton's legacy? A man who didn't scream when silenced, who showed the mirror and made them bigger look. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just someone finally listening.